Okay. Yeah, I was invited to speak to a very broad topic like leadership in the era of artificial intelligence. So yeah, my main focus is in leadership research, is collaborative leadership, especially in expert organizations like R&D organizations, universities, the knowledge-intensive firms. So the idea was really to structure the presentation in this way that I start with some basic leadership perspectives and consequences of doing leadership research. Then very short, I just declare what is my understanding of artificial intelligence or artificial intelligence-driven leadership. Yeah. And the third part is leadership in the age of artificial intelligence. So kind of how can we mix these fields together from a social scientist, from a social constructivist view. And the last part is towards the research agenda on leadership and RE from a social constructionist point of view. Leadership perspectives. I think we can separate leadership research in three main areas. The first one is the research about leadership styles, very traditional view of the heroic leader that have a kind of behavioral repertoire to change the behavior of the followers. So, and the second one is a more relational leadership concept. And the third one, a newer one, is the interpretation of leadership as a social practice, the practice-based view. So the first one, if we take the perspective of a leader-centered approach, the leadership is a property of the leader, of the individual. And the focus is on what leaders do. And the unit of analysis in leadership research is a person's unique leadership style. So the routinized, relatively stable set of behaviors. And I think this is important if we think how we can connect AE with leadership research. Then we have to think about what kind of basic theoretical framework we choose for thinking about this connection. So in this view, like visionary leadership, leadership as coaching, transformative leadership style, etc., all this set of stable patterns of leadership behavior has a name. And leadership is about really influencing people to follow a course of action. So this is a very established view of leadership. The second one, the relational leadership concept, is, from my point of view, very interesting because it really could build a basis to create artificial intelligence as a colleague or a team member of leadership teams. Yeah. So relational leadership is a kind of the interpretation of leadership as a dialogical construct. And the unit of analysis in relational leadership is the emergent relational dynamic that is often found in the form of a local, situational interaction between leaders and followers or organizational members. And the basic unit of analysis in this school of thinking is talk and language. So if we analyze in this framework leadership or create a research project, then very often we have qualitative research settings and we analyze the talk and language about leadership. And if we try to develop a figure that encompasses all this thinking, it's quite the idea of leadership identities that create leadership in a constant interrelation. So maybe leader A has a self-concept of leadership, kind of his or her story of leadership, depending on his or her biography. And his or her behaviors in this line interrelate with the self-concept of leadership of the follower of person B. Yeah? And leadership is everything between these two persons. It's a really complex relational construct. It's based on mutual interpretation of what is leadership based on their identity. Yeah? And all this, and this complex relation is really embedded, of course, in a cultural context, in a context of organizational culture, national culture, and a collective understanding of leadership. And of course, we can imagine if we use more and more artificial intelligence, more and more digital technologies, we use predictive analytics in HR, etc. So this cultural context and also this collective understanding of human resource processes and leadership will change. And this, of course, will influence our self-understanding of leadership and our understanding of leadership relations. So please keep that figure in your mind. So typical research questions in this field is, how do we relate to each other? How do leaders talk about their relationships and what do they see as being important in those relationships? So mostly we have qualitative research in this field. So it's about analyzing leadership patterns in conversation. What kind of dominant patterns we found, what is important for them, and we try to analyze in the conversation and through the analysis of talk and meaning of leadership, what leadership is. And the third school of thinking of leadership research is leadership as practice. And here we have the focus on the work of leadership. So it's not about the social construction of leadership, it's not about the leadership style. So in this school of thinking, we analyze the work, the doing of leadership. And that's quite interesting if we think, how do machines influence decision-making systems in leadership? And if we take the work of leadership as a unit of analysis, maybe it's quite easy to integrate machines in our concept of leadership. So practice becomes the engine of collaborative agency. So it includes also an unheroic work of practitioners. So machines, artifacts, social media, everything could create leadership work. Also SAP, software programs, HR tech solutions could produce leadership in a daily practice. Yeah. So I'm not artificial intelligence specialist, so mostly I work in very interdisciplinary teams. And of course, you are all aware of this classical definitions of artificial intelligence. So that's why I integrate one of Kaplan and Henlein. And you also aware of all these different levels of artificial intelligence we talk about. So I think for my presentation, it's really important to understand what is AI-driven leadership. And for me, it's a kind of technology allowing a significant portion of leadership decision-making in a group or an organizational context to be delegated to an AI-based decision system. So AI-driven leadership is really that a part of the leadership decision could be delegated to an AI system. And Björkman and Johansson developed two different perspectives that, from my point of view, encompasses a lot of the current perspectives and the discourses about this topic. So automated leadership decision-making is one of these main discussions when we talk about leadership and AI. And artificial intelligence brings, of course, valuable information and insights to different organizational levels. So we have a lot of literature in our literature databases, and they talk about more responsibility and decision-making power can be delegated to lower levels of the organization. This is a very important discussion that AI could help to democratize organizations and to decentralize power from the top management to lower levels of management, team members, etc. And the second point is that AI can help to interpret a large amount of data, and that could help that leaders could focus on their main job to be a strategic leader, to organize creativity, to organize motivation in the organization, and do not control over data. So this could be a partner role of artificial intelligence to help leaders with all the administrative stuff. And to base decisions on facts and not on emotions, intuitions, etc. So AI is very often discussed as a kind of neutral decision maker, bringing a kind of total transparency to the decision-making process. And of course, if we follow this argumentation, then we have the chance to shift power in organizations from top management to lower levels. So this is a very strongly discussed hot topic in the current discussion. The challenges are, of course, we have a lot of biases in the AI systems currently. We have the question of ethics, responsibility, accountability, ethical monitoring. It's difficult to evaluate artificial intelligence data. So currently, it's a kind of utopia that we play in leadership research, because currently we have a lot of AI decision-based systems that has a lot of mistakes. So that's why we have a lot of discussions about how do leaders react if AI makes mistakes, for example. Yeah. So all the questions about responsibility, we heard it before, is a very established discussion. But I think this automated leadership decision-making is really strongly connected to this quite traditional and established view of leadership research as research about leadership styles. It's a kind of the idea we have a principal-agent problem in larger organization. We have this kind of heroic leaders, and they need decision support. Yeah. So also this kind of image of a single leader that has a lot of power, and we can reduce this power using artificial intelligence to create more transparency, to create more fact-based decisions, etc. So I think here we could have a new stream of research about how AI decision supporting systems could fit to what kind of leadership style. Yeah. And maybe this is a heuristic that could help us to sort or to structure the field a little bit. And the second perspective that is really strongly discussed at the moment is, leaders now have a lot of time. If the machines do all this decision work and all this collection of important facts, then we have leaders, they can invest in creativity. They can invest in enhancing collaboration, motivating people, and all this really more creative part. So, and artificial intelligence can facilitate decision-making processes and perform several tasks really better than humans, but leaders will have to put more emphasis on what cannot be done by artificial intelligence. So really, the main focus of leaders will be in the future more on this social part, emotional part, inspiration, and collaboration. Yeah, so we need a lot of entrepreneurs and willing to experiment with new technologies that are open for artificial intelligence pilot projects, and that's not easy. If you want to do empirical research and you are looking for a really open-minded departments that like to collaborate with you and to be very open to share their experiences with artificial intelligence and their communication practice is quite hard as a qualitative researcher. So a lot of argumentation currently in the scientific papers are that leaders should be really entrepreneurs that are quite open for these new experiments. And it's also about the acceptance of artificial intelligence as a knowledge partner, this kind of understanding that you have a new team member in your team, this RE supporting machine, we can call it Alexa or Siri for top management teams. This understanding is not very established yet. And also we have a lot of resistance of employees. So this morning I heard this presentation of the head of artificial intelligence of Novartis, and I know a lot of Novartis employees that use currently their private WhatsApp tools, their private chats, because they do not want to be part of this artificial intelligence project, and they do not want to receive a kind of automated feedback in the field of leadership. So they more and more use their private chat tools because they create a kind of second space to save their privacy. So the resistance of employees will be immense from my point of view. So, and also a very important question is the focus on exclusively creative and entrepreneurial tasks for humans. If the machine does the rest of the work, we should think about the implications for the health, psychological health and health factor overall in organizations, because it's quite stressful to do all day long, or the whole day, the creative part of the work and being not involved in routinized work anymore. And the last question, I think it's very interesting. If we talk about humans are responsible for the creative part, and for the rest, machines have more and more responsibility. What is about artificial creativity? So what kind of definition of creativity we have in 10 or 20 years? So I think machines are really capable to create a lot of really new things, and they can connect ideas in a very unique way. And I think in the next 10 years, we will have really new definitions of organizational creativity that really integrate all this artificial intelligence-based creativity. Yeah, I think collaborative leadership could be an interesting leadership school of thinking to integrate RE as a leadership partner, as a collaborative leadership partner, like we talk about women and men in mixed leadership teams. So we have machines and humans in mixed leadership teams in a collaborative way. And we have to define rules, and we have to define a culture, a leadership culture that is capable to create this collaborative space. So I have two citations here that I found. I think the search for an appropriate setting to include RE in leadership concept is quite high. So the Rob High, the vice president and CTO of IBM Watson, he said, "What I'm looking for out of cognitive systems is not just another form of computing, but something that actually creates a presence in our life that inspires us." And that's, I think, the challenge for us to create a leadership concept that is capable to integrate all this machine learning in our leadership world. And collaborative leadership is the capacity to engage people and groups outside one's formal control or formal position, so outside of a leadership position, and inspire them to work towards common goals. And of course, machines can be programmed or can be designed that they also work for a common goal and be part of a leadership community in an organization. Because we do not have a focus on leadership behavior and leadership decisions from single persons or groups of persons, so we look for leadership practices. And machines could also be responsible for leadership practices. So collaborative leadership is a meta capability that encourages movement from day-to-day actions by individuals to core process and capabilities. And from this point of view, you can integrate machines in this job. And of course, if we have a social constructionist or a leadership identity perspective, so I presented this figure of this interrelation of the leader and the follower as a conception of leadership, then we can think about what kind of identities could machines create. What kind of self-conceptions could machines create through self-learning systems? Is there a kind of machine identity that we can connect with leadership identity or follow the identity of followers? So where machine identities begin and ends is an interesting question if we talk about social interaction in collaborative leadership sessions. So I try to integrate artificial intelligence as a decision system, as a leadership teammate. And if we think about a machine that has a database conception of leadership, because this constant learning through interaction with leaders with human leaders and human followers create a kind of database conception of leadership. And maybe we have this interplay between leaders and machines, and that has a new influence on the self-conception of leadership of our followers or organizational members. And then we have a new concept or heuristic where we can integrate machines in our social construction of leadership in the future. And also it's a kind of also the cultural context will change. So if our children are really in school or at our universities, they are really very often use voice assistants, and they have a really completely other relationship with voice assistants like our generation has. And when this generation enter our organization in 10 or 20 years, then they will have a completely different handling of assistance, of digital assistance through their biography. And also, if this context changes, of course, we have completely different self-understandings or self-concept, what is good leadership or what is effective leadership. So AI-driven collaborative leadership, as different levels of expertise are called for different people, and AI systems may emerge as leaders. Of course, successful collaboration and shared leadership requires trust and empathy. I think the other large school of thinking is what you, Marisa, also you are interested in this relation of trust, and also the HSG is quite involved in this topic. Of course, all this collaborative success will depend on what kind of ethical regulations and trust management and what kind of empathy we have in this shared leadership settings between machines and humans. And I think we need leaders that are really embrace ambiguity and paradoxes as if they are responsible for this pilot projects involving artificial intelligence in their leadership decisions. So I think if they try to do that, then they should be open for highly uncertain situations, and they should be coached in this way, because I think there are only a few leaders, they embrace paradoxes, ambiguity, and uncertainty, and are ready for this kind of leadership jobs in the future. So this could be a quite important leadership competence program to invite leaders to think in quite, or to be capable to work in quite open and uncertain conditions. I think artificial intelligence will be part of a collective dynamic construction of leadership and will be part of the work of leadership. And I think this leadership as practice way is an excellent way to construct this future work for us. So if I try to bring that together, so we have in the center artificial intelligence as leadership collaboration partner. And if we try to establish this point of view, then we need creative leaders ready for experiments. We have to develop leaders that are capable to organize technologies. We need to develop leaders that are capable to involve employees and all the employees and organization member in this journey. So participatory leadership will be very important, and also the topic trust, cultural development, integrity management, so that we heard before. All this call for action for ethical leaders will be the fourth very important skill set for leaders. And of course, I think every experienced employee, every expert likes to know answers or likes to hear the answers of the questions, goals beyond artificial intelligence. So what is the business goal and the strategy beyond the implementation of artificial intelligence? So this is the sense-making part. Yeah, and we have a lot of offers from the collaborative leadership school of thinking. Here is one example. So we have from Relin a kind of list of collaborative leadership support practices. And for me, it's a possible heuristic for thinking in what kind of behavioral patterns or what kind of leadership behavioral patterns we could think of artificial intelligence as supporting this decision supporting tool. Yeah. And for me, this kind of analyzing this collaborative leadership models to find these narrow points where artificial intelligence could create value is very helpful. Because this morning I heard that artificial intelligence, sometimes it's really a really narrow field where technology can support decisions. And I think we have to define all this narrow fields of leadership decisions where machines could help. Exactly. So, and this is still not done, or it's an open field of research. Current projects at our school, we have a lot of very interdisciplinary projects where we have to learn to speak with each other. So like Marisa told us today, so like these workshops this morning were quite hard for her as a social scientist. And for us, it's really a challenge to connect work psychologists, organizational psychologists, sociologists, and economists with all the IT specialists to create really interdisciplinary research in this field. And currently we have a research project about people analytics. It's with a German university. We have a Synergia project from the Swiss National Fund. It's about voice assistance and the investigation of the everyday practice and routines of people using voice assistants. It's really a project that where designers are involved, social scientists, IT specialists, etc. And I'm currently involved in a project with a startup from Zurich. It's called We Went, and we try to develop an AI-driven team booster. So it's a kind of helping team leaders to develop their teams with an AI assistant. So we have a lot of projects in this field, and it's challenging to work in this kind of interdisciplinary setting. Yeah, thank you very much for your attention, and yeah.